Good morning, fellow Ugandans. This is Uganda Panorama, a service provided to you by Voice of Uganda Radio, a subsidiary of the Federalist Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda. This is your host, Kiwanuka Nsseleko. I would like, first of all, to apologize to all of you wonderful listeners and the patrons of this program. But for the last 3 weeks, I've been unable to be here to share and learn with you. A number of issues did stop me from being here, including the untimely passing of my mother. Thanks to all those who have called and counseled me. I appreciate your concern. But as usual, we move forward. And we stay the course, as we say. All we have to do here is to defend and share the truth, tell the truth, and preserve the truth. This is our duty and calling. Our options in this regard are very limited because we cannot lose hope. For being hopeless is not part of our agenda. The agenda of liberating our mother nation, Uganda, and ensuring that truth, freedom, and liberty are shared and preserved worldwide. Surely we might lose a battle here and there. Our hopes might sink a little bit. But the war of elevating truth, seeing that fairness rules and justice prevails for all people, is ours to win. And certainly we are on a winning track. Let us all be anchored in this principle of fighting for freedom and truth. Let us ensure that the ideology of freedom for all guides us. We must move and shake the ground and transform ourselves into a force that practices the politics of values, not just the politics of God and my stomach. It should be for God and our country, where we see all as equal before the law. We must disavow sectarianism, tribalism, nepotism, while at the same time being proud in our varied cultures. That should lead us to weave ourselves into a multicolored, multicultural, peaceful tapestry of love and respect for human freedom and dignity for all. Our defiling ways of life make us into a beautiful rainbow. And let us allow this rainbow to arc across the sky and preserve freedom for all, liberating our country from the narrow parochial oligarchy of Yoweri Museveni and his attendants. Plutocracy, the politics of money, must come to an end and power be returned to the people, and freedom must prevail. That's our calling, that's our duty, that's our responsibility, fellow listeners. A number of things have happened in the last 3 weeks, but they are major news events. And there are major political concerns, social, economic issues. For example, today as we speak, the exchange rate of a dollar reached its highest point in the history of Uganda. So Museveni is telling you, and his people are telling us, and the government is trying to tell us that we all doing well. Well, when Museveni ascended to power, the dollar was 1,415 Uganda shillings. Today, it is twice that amount. However, one needs to recall that the shilling was devalued in 1987, and that included the 30% and the 2 zeros knocked off. Therefore, if we are looking with all the adjustments done the dollar at that time was 14 shilling 50 cents. Today, it is 3,210 shillings. That is a cause to worry. If that is improvement in the economic field, then my teachers in the economic classes from high school through university did something fundamentally wrong. Wonderful people. That could have been the major story, but that's not the major story. The major story is what I'm going to share. And don't think it's the Amama Mbaba's declaration of his candidacy. That's not the big news. Those are political games. Let them be played out, and we shall see how they end. The real news that should have concerned and caught the headline seriously is not the Mbaba's announcement and the crybaby response from Museveni of why are you trying to steal my cake while I am still enjoying it, my brother. No. Our concern should have been drawn to the anti-terrorist bill amendment that passed Parliament the day before yesterday on Thursday. Despite vehement opposition and protestations from the opposition, because there was no quorum in Parliament, the anti-terrorism amendment bill was passed into law. This is a standard of the conduct of the NRM parliamentary system. The bill was passed after numerous failed attempts by the opposition to convince the Speaker, Nsseleko Kadaga, to adjourn the House to yesterday, Friday, to allow further consultation on the contested provisions of the draft law. After futile attempts, the opposition protested and walked out. The bill here being referenced has the entire bill is very dangerous to freedom, liberties, and security of the country. But the bill has three major provisions that are dangerous to freedom. Namely, the definition of the Terror Act, which the members of parliament try to ask that let what qualifies as a terrorist act be defined. The government attorney general, Ruhindi, refused to do so. And the definition of what qualifies as terrorism is left to the Inspector General of Police to decide what qualifies as a terrorist act. In the same regard, the Inspector General of Police, in this case Kaleka Yuhura, is being granted the powers to investigate and prosecute, while at the same time, he's playing the role of a judge. The law is also trying to criminalize media content, especially social media. So your post on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Twitter, or Google apps, an email might, in the mind of Kaihura, if he decides, qualify as a terrorist act. One wonders why this law could not wait until Parliament resumes its business in about a week and had to be passed under emergency sitting. There's a number of things. If we are to believe some people, it also involves maybe Amama Mbabazi's campaign. It intends to stop the transfer of money that, according to those in the know, Mbabazi had stashed outside the country into the country, because the bill empowers the Inspector General of Police to decide that, in his opinion, a given bank account, has money that is intended for use in terrorist acts, and that money can be confiscated when the Inspector General of Government decides so. Now, this is of concern. The bill clearly states that the IGP can order a bank, listen to me, can order a bank to freeze someone's account or seize personal property if suspected of involvement in terrorist activities, or suspected that the resources of the funds or the property might be used. Basically, we are entering the era of thought police in Uganda. Also, in the same bill, it is clearly said that damage or property damage will henceforth be considered a terrorist act. And someone whispered to me that actually what they had in mind was the possibility that people would be tearing down campaign posters of Yoweri Museveni, and as such, whoever dares do so will be considered a threat to national security and a terrorist. Despite the existence of the Uganda Penal Code, which clearly under its civil law and criminal law takes care of such activities, even the election law, which now the government is very fond of to use against other people who are challenging Museveni. Section 17A1 of the Anti-Terrorist Amendment Bill 2015 reads as follows, and this is the paragraph I'm going to conclude with in regard to this, and the people who are listening, you will take care of the rest. The Inspector General of Police shall, if he or she has reason to believe that any account held in a financial institution has funds on the account which are reasonably linked or intended for terrorism activities, direct in writing a financial institution at which the account is maintained to freeze the account in accordance with the directive. Watch out for your property rights, my friends in Uganda. But more importantly, those of you who are transferring funds from outside the country into Uganda, be mindful of the law. So with such laws in existence in Uganda, what does one do? How does one deal with such a situation? Where does one go? We cannot go anywhere. We can only go to one point, and that point is ourselves. The people need to own themselves. The people must stop allowing the government to own their mind, body, and soul. And we step out and demand what is ours. Today, for my major thrust, I want to start with excerpts from Jabeli Bidandi Sali's letter to Museveni 3.5 years ago, which he wrote soon after the last elections. He writes, "As I chaired the executive committee of the People's Progressive Party last week, discussing the way forward for the country and our party. I called a meeting chaired as chairman of the Uganda Patriotic Movement, UPM, which was led by Yoweri Museveni in the 1980s, at Kintu Musoke's residence in 1980, discussing the way forward for Uganda and the UPM. This was after what we then termed sham election results by the Military Commission following an electoral exercise that had been characterized by vote falsification by the UPC leadership in control at the time. The UPM Executive Committee discussed two options, that is, going back at the people and build the UPM or go to the bush to take up arms to fight the Obote regime. In anticipation of what would be the cost in human life that had to be paid by Ugandans, the Executive Committee resolved for the former option, to which some of us stuck. You, Yoweri Museveni, you stormed out of the meeting, telling that you had taken the armed option. To date, your decision is epitomized by the devastated Rural Triangle, scattered with monumental human skulls, and a devastated northern region still wailing the massacre of more than 1 million Ugandans, with more unaccounted for. As I write, other political parties are also discussing the country, their parties. Some of them have resolved as a preliminary reaction to the elections to call upon the disgruntled people of Uganda express their displeasure through a peaceful demonstration. Your response has been, anybody who dare goes the streets for demonstration will be killed. And your armed groups are ready, deployed in a position ready to execute that order. Your Excellency, so imbued with military prowess that you are convinced that you will be able to preside over a police state, you are creating pitched on patronage, the might of the gun, and the power of the money. The sustainability of such a state, Mr. President, is not born out of any example in recent history. My concern, Mr. President, is what is next for the country. You are convinced that the situation is very much under your control and that every Ugandan will be cowed down because of the presence of the military hardware and the threats you keep dishing out. They remind me of a similar scenario by the Obote regime as you went to the bush. They were so sure of their invincibility. You are so sure, Mr. Museveni. Many Ugandans are convinced that the situation is politically volatile and that it needs a statesman approach to avert a chaos that can anytime turn bloody during or even worse after our lifetime, you and I. Surely, Mr. President, Uganda should never be subject to another spate of bloodletting and self-destruction. We need to create a political environment in which all seeds of hatred and strife amongst the people of Uganda are never given opportunity to germinate. The result of the election have created despair and disenchantment over elections in the country for many Ugandans. This has produced a political explosive situation in the country, which has even forced to deploy members and other kind of military at almost every sub-county in Uganda, ready to more citizens who dare raise a finger expressing their discontent. Somebody out there is wondering, why is this man raising these issues? Fellow listeners, I bring this because the warning has been there. The potential for Ugandans to rise up against the regime is present. It is calling for mobilization and leadership. And this is where the political leadership in Uganda must come in. If you look at military hardware that is spread out in the country, there is no way any sane political leader can imagine that under the prevailing circumstances, a ballot paper is going to compel Museveni to hand over power. That is surely, certainly, definitely an impossibility. In January 1986, Museveni became president of Uganda after manipulating the ruling military junta. His coming to power was a coup of sorts. because he had agreed with the Rutwa regime that he is the vice president. And he went back on all those. But during his inaugural speech, when he came to power, he stated, and this has been repeated in several other places, that the problem of Africa in general and Uganda in particular is not the people but leaders who want to overstay in power. He promised to rule for only 4 years, which has now turned into 30 years. The 4 years interim period, after which a free and fair election would be held for Ugandans to elect a leader of their choice. He adopted a Marxist-oriented approach to governance by establishing a no-party democracy. At the end of the 4-year interim period, he extended it for another 5 years under pretext of making a new constitution for Uganda. Indeed, a new constitution came into force in 1995. Among the pillars of the 1995 constitution was Article 105 that placed a 5-year term for the president limit. In 1996, the first general election were held, but still under his military rule, guised as a no-party democracy. In 2001, another general election was held, still under the same military dictatorial environment. Since his constitutional 2 5-year terms were coming to an end in 2005, he instead bribed members of parliament to amend the constitution by scrapping the constitutional 2-term limits. At that particular time, corruption came from the back room into the front room. He was eventually forced by court and political pressure and lifted the over a 10-year-old ban on political party, and he turned the NRA, NRM government structures into a political party for which he contested for the presidency. During this first multi-party election, the role of the military in ensuring that he retains the presidency became an open secret. We all remember what things like Tumukunde did in Imbarara, the behaviors of General Sejusa, and several other senior military officers who have since then fallen out with the government. The role of the military became more open during the 2006 general elections, where it was responsible for the harassment of the opposition, intimidation of voters, ballot stuffing, arrest and shooting of opposition supporters, and other criminal activities. Some of this is not only my word, but people like General Sejusa have testified publicly and have stated clearly in public that they were involved in manipulating the results of the election. The courts of law have twice said that the elections in Uganda were not free and fair, but because of pressure from somewhere else, they stopped short of nullification of the election. So where I'm going with all this story and the narrative is that, one, people like Tumukunde, who is basically on house arrest of sorts, people like General David Sejusa, who is beginning to be harassed. He was in prison for some hours yesterday. People who were close to Kiza Besigye, now Amama Mbabazi, and so many other people who were close to the regime have been forced out of the regime. So for those people who are still in the regime, the writing is on the wall that your day is nigh. You are better off doing the right thing now than wait for ages to do the right thing. So this rigging scenario was repeated in 2011 general election. The opposition found it a waste of time to resort to the courts of law because of what I have just told you, that the court said, yes, there was malpractices in the election, but we cannot actually nullify the election. So they decided not to go to court. Instead, the opposition spearheaded the masses who took the streets to express their anger. But because of the violent nature of the Uganda regime, people could not sustain themselves on the streets. And a few things here need to be talked about, because often a number of people ask, why is it not possible for the kind of uprising that has been seen in other parts of Africa through the Arab Spring, why can't it happen in Uganda? It will happen, but it's not very easy to happen in Uganda, because Uganda is a dictatorship of a different nature. To think that Kagame of Rwanda is violent. Yes, he is violent to a level, but it doesn't measure up to what Yoweri Museveni is. Yes, you can go to the streets and demonstrate in Burundi, and Nkurunziza cannot do or carry out the kind of violence Museveni and his henchmen are capable of. You cannot do the same you cannot do the same in Uganda as you do in Kenya. So this is why it's been difficult to get people on the streets. The Museveni regime pounced with extreme violence against the citizens who were on the streets to demonstrate. But also the economic stronghold on the country that almost every middle-class citizen in Uganda, every person who can afford 3 meals a day, must have somehow, somewhere, a connection to the government structure is very fundamental in what happens in Uganda. People cannot sustain themselves. So if they go to the streets to demonstrate, their feeding tubes will be cut. And that has kept so many people, mainly the middle class, the people who would be offering leadership, to demonstrate, to participate in the political activities. I know this because I talk to some of them, to a good number. And this is where their fear comes from. So the protests were mainly in Kampala and the urban centers, where some people have a reasonable level of awareness. And that is the second point, which regards the media, that the media in Uganda is muzzled up. Somebody was telling me that the media center in Uganda has a wing where journalists go to pick their pays, or where journalists write stories, and if they publish, the government pays them off. It is either threatens them into submission that they are on the government payroll. So these are major concerns as we confront the dictatorship in Uganda. It is this kind of speculation that made the likes of David Tinyefunza, Amama Mbabazi to step out and challenge Museveni, say they are going to challenge Museveni in the coming election. Tinyefunza has been pushed over the fence into the political opposition. Amama Mbabazi is there, and there are so many people waiting to come in. Instead, Museveni, who is trying to block all these individuals, has been warming up for seeking another term in 2016. Knowing that Ugandans are tired of his dictatorship, he has resorted to digging trenches in preparation for the tough times ahead. He has completed the personalization of the army by creating a 10,000 plus strong elite force under the command of his son. He has militarized the police force by deploying army officers to take command of the force, giving it military training in military camps, and created more security outfits without regard of the constitutional provision. He is involving the military in suppressing political dissent, participation in civilian politics, and implementation of government programs like NADS. This week, he has crowned Kaihura a judge of sorts under the anti-terrorist bill passed last Thursday. He has bribed, manipulated, and intimidated his cohorts into endorsing him as their solo candidate. He is buying off MPs and other government officials to popularize his solo candidature. He is a media taken to Chankwans for military training, and eventually when they come back, as we have seen in the past week, that the former editor of the Monitor has been now taken on by viewers, kicked out of office for manipulating news headlines. Serving soldiers have been moved into agriculture sector, purposely to further the gospel of his solo candidature as he selectively retires more soldiers and cadres in the same mission. He has deployed under the guise of poverty alleviation his brother. He is traversing the country to popularize his solo candidature while dishing out billions of taxpayers' money to his cohorts. All these are unconstitutional and criminal activities the Museveni regime is engaging in. The army, through the Minister of Internal Affairs, who is a military general, has been involved in registering and in preparation of national IDs, which are to form the voters' register for the 2016 elections. The military regime, disguised as a political party, is so fused with the state that the former uses public resources in financing his presidency scheme. The introduction of the draconian Public Order Management Act in 2003, which is similar to the UPC Public Order and Security Act of 1967, is meant to stifle political dissent, and now it has found a cousin in the Anti-Terrorist Act passed this week, and this is also intended to dupe the Western world in regards to the word terrorism. Many political opponents, people like Dr. Agure Kinji, a cardiologist who intends to challenge Yoweri Museveni, has been labeled a terrorist. And Museveni is looking for more ways of labeling other Ugandans as terrorists when it comes to those who challenge him politically. Museveni is scheming for a constitutional amendment in respect of Article 102 pertaining to the constitutional age limit of 75 years, so that he qualifies to rule beyond the age of 75 years of age. So those who think that Museveni is now, it's only 2016 that he has his eyes on, please think twice. Museveni is busy indoctrinating the young through compulsory attendance of quasi-military drills and ideological manipulation under the guise of patriotism classes. It is now compulsory for all those who complete high school to attend such indoctrination program before joining institutions of higher learning. Those who seem to adapt and pick up the interest in the NRM ideology are given full scholarships to universities, and they are sent into targeted education courses. Museveni, as we saw last week in Massacre, this week in Massacre, he's out against liberal arts education. And a couple months ago, I discussed this topic extensively, that he is pushing for science, and that people, and I have nothing against sciences, it's wonderful, but it has to be balanced by the arts. So Museveni himself is an art student, not a science student. So if he believes that those who do science, who do arts are useless to society, then he's the first useless person to society. And he has to swallow that. Okay. So we see all this, even those already in such institutions, in the universities, are dragged to such indoctrination centers. We saw how about 3,000 university students this year alone have gone training in Masindi and have been let go after they finish the military training. Museveni argues that they need these to ensure university security. We have seen people like a senior serving army officer, General Ronda Nyakayurima, recently told people in Rukungiri that you must support the NRM party and ignore the propaganda from FDC and other opposition parties. It is only NRM that can deliver. Now, this is a serving army officer talking about a political party. we have seen the same bias in the Electoral Commission, where when Amama Mbabazi challenges Museveni, he is told to stop making consultations because the Electoral Commission has not given him the right to do so. Now, one wonders whether the Electoral Commission is part of the NRM internal organization or not. But by deed and by act, surely it is. So, the Electoral Commission, which I refer to as Museveni's Electoral Commission, is bent on delivering another rigged victory for him come 2016, assisted by the army as evidenced by the Nyakairima utterances. The Electoral Commission has released an electoral roadmap for a 4-month campaign period, displayed the voter register, and promised 10 billion shillings as facilitation for political parties. The ruling military dictatorship is to pocket 80% or has pocketed 80% of this funding. District commissioners, chief administration officers, internal security officers, and police commanders have been dragged to the indoctrination centers for months of brainstorming on how to go about the 2016 election rigging. Security officers, under the cover of city law enforcement, are busy systematically getting rid of the city center of hawkers, vendors, taxi, and commercial motorcycle riders in order to suffocate any effort to peacefully demonstrate. Those who stay in the city center as hawkers or as commercial motorcycle riders, have to be members of the NRM. All non-members are being identified and are being pushed out of the city. To crown it, a new bill seeking to regulate NGOs is in the offing. It is designed to silence critics and negate the very essence of freedom of association and expression. It is targeting civil society organizations, especially those which deal with human rights and are seen as unsympathetic to Yoweri Museveni's political conduct. It stipulates that such organizations shall not engage in any activities which are prejudicial to the interests of Uganda. And in the mind of the current regime in Uganda, the interests of Uganda are the interests of Yoweri Museveni and no other person. It imposes heavy fines alongside periods of imprisonment of individuals running those organizations. From the above, what I have stated, it is clear that the opposition parties have been and continue to play the role of a lame duck that simply accompanies the military dictatorship to legitimize his hold on power. There is no ruling party in Uganda, thus there is no need for opposition parties. What we need is a combination force that is going to remove the dictatorship from power. The level of operation meted out on the population by the military dictatorship calls for a mass uprising to bring about political change. Once such change is achieved, political parties can go back to their respective constituencies and participate in the democratic elections that are free and fair. The parties have the task of mobilizing the masses to reclaim constitutional order in the country, nothing more than that. To think otherwise is to imagine harvesting in the wild, and the fruits, like it has been in the last 30 years, will be bitter. We need to save our country. Pushing for electoral reforms is not tenable under the current Museveni military dictatorship. He can even give in to all their demands of the opposition for electoral reforms that were put forward, except resettlement of term limits, but still carry the day through rigging. However, after he will be re-elected in 2016, he will reinstate the 2-term limits. The peanut funding of political parties by the regime is simply mockery whose timing is designed to divide them. The opposition parties should demand not more than the reinstatement of presidential term limits and the law to stop Museveni from being on the ballot. Otherwise, all this is a waste of time. Article 3 of the Constitution makes it treasonable for anyone to amend the constitution recklessly, as Museveni has done several times. The same article confers a right and a duty to every citizen to resist any such attempt to overthrow, abrogate, amend, and suspend the constitution. This is a responsibility for Ugandans to wake up and resist the moves by the current regime to abrogate and amend the constitution. Because of bribery and the numbers in parliament, which has been Museveni's main weapon, invoking Article 107 of the constitution is not tenable because it stipulates that the president may be removed from office for misconduct or misbehavior if he/she has conducted herself in a manner which brings or is likely to bring the office of the president into hatred, ridicule, contempt, or disrepute, or if he or she has dishonestly done any act or omission which is prejudicial or inimical to the economy or security of Uganda. The current regime under Museveni's leadership has committed all these vile acts and more, but because of their dominance in parliament, which is planned for such purposes, this Article 107 of the Uganda Constitution is inapplicable. Therefore, what is applicable is what is contained in Article 105 of the Constitution, that the people should rise up and overthrow any regime of such people. And when they do so, afterwards, if they are charged with treason, they should be compensated for and their records cleaned by the laws. Such a move would require a notice to the Speaker, if you want to use Article 107, signed by not less than 1/3 of all MPs, which is an impossibility. So any election in which Museveni is participating is a waste of time and a handover of ourselves to the wolf and playing in its den. The solution is to resist the enemy while the enemy is still outside the walls. Going into the election is allowing the enemy to enter our walls, and we think we are going to fight from within. No, the enemy must be fought from outside. Therefore, the opposition parties to be preoccupied with the internal squabbles for leadership positions, all fighting for jointly fielding the candidates, they are risking getting more divided and weaker, because people will be disappointed in them and they will step aside. The priority is not democratic electoral reforms today, to take a part or to boycott the election, but to rally the desperate masses into getting rid of Museveni and his military dictatorship. The people of Uganda are desperate for political leadership. That's why you see them running to the Mbabazis in some way or form. Mass uprising, if history is to tell us what it is, and the acts of disobeying the government law are possible. Mass uprising has happened in Uganda before. It can happen again. Let me give you some examples. Those who did the history of Uganda, you remember the Ramogi Rebellion. It was fought by the natives of present-day Amuru district in 1911 against the British colonialists, when they tried to take over land and introduce certain laws that they did not agree to. And the Ramogi Rebellion was successful. When the colonial government tried to introduce foreigners in Bunyoro to lord over the Banyoro. The Nyangile movement, which was a defiance, but eventually turned the bloody between the Banyoro and the British colonialists and the foreigners who were being sent to Bunyoro to govern them, was successful, and the Banyoro rejected the foreign rulers, and they ended up having their own chiefs. These are all local uprising. In 1945, Martin Luther Nsseleko was assassinated by a local named Kiwanuka. When the latter figured, as many at the time did, that Nsseleko was way too close to the colonial powers, the assassination of Nsseleko at the footsteps of the cathedral at Namilembe on a Sunday morning send a chilling message to the political elite in Uganda, and they reversed their conduct. This was maybe 2 or 3 individuals who took it upon themselves to send a message. Therefore, it's possible to be done in Uganda. The Bataka uprising in Uganda of 1949 was the climax of a series of defiant actions against economic inequalities. In 1948, Baganda had made an uprising to push for the direct representation in the Ruchiko. The role of ex-servicemen in the uprising in Uganda can't be underrated. They were very instrumental. And we have a number of ex-servicemen who can be instrumental in leading Uganda to change today. It is such uprisings that gave shape to nationalism, that saw the formation of the first political parties and the demand for self-rule. And eventually the little oasis of democracy that Uganda saw in the first 2 years of the 1960s. The boycott movement, led by Kamia, forced the colonial authorities to cede produce processing, cotton ginning, and coffee processing rights to the natives. These are all issues that can be done because there's no reason why today Ugandans cannot identify the business entities of the political vouchers of NRM and boycott them. It's possible. We know whose hotel, we know whose shop, we know whose building. This is possible. This is where every person, every individual can do something towards the liberation of our country from this regime. The nationalistic defiance of Baganda nationalism compelled the colonialists to bring back the king who had been exiled in the United Kingdom. People were defiant. They refused to pay taxes. Today, Ugandans can refuse to pay taxes in the same way. The 1962 Rwenzururu Rebellion for independence and freedom from the yoke of the Toro Kingdom persisted through the 1980s and achieved most of its objectives. The 1966 attempted assassination of then President Milton Obote by Baganda nationalists in revenge for the attack on their king by ordinary Baganda, led by Dan Kamanyi, who is still alive. So, the assistance of disgruntled former soldiers in laying the ambush around Portobello Road in Kampala. Instead, it is his Vice President Babiha who was injured, but the message was clear. So there's a history of uprising, both involving simple militaristic actions and civil disobedience. And this can be done today if the political leadership is determined to decide to people. What I am arguing today is that the people are ready. the political leadership is the one that is scared. The massive uprising of the people of northern Uganda who rejected the rule right from the start has persisted for the last 30 years because they knew that his coming was a tribalistic, ethnic cleansing approach which they rejected, and they have persisted for the last 30 years opposing the regime. The 2009 riots by Baganda after Museveni blocked their king from visiting part of his kingdom in Kayunga, where Museveni wanted to carve out Uganda, a part of Uganda, and give it to some other interests, sent a clear message. The Mabira forest riots in defense of the environmental concerns and the land grabbing was another clear message. And these were all by local people. The walk to work demonstrations in Kampala were fundamental in sending a message. So all these elements that have come up, we need to mobilize them. The 2014 massive daylight mutinious and coordinated attack by poorly armed locals on police and military installations in Rwenzori, despite the result of massively killing the people, was very worrying to Museveni. It was an open expression of anger by sections of Ugandan masses of people who were being brought in from other parts of the country and dumped into Kasese, where Museveni is trying to create a buffer political zone. If things go wrong, that he has a place to run it to and use it. All these are present. And maybe for me, the most thrilling and the most interesting uprising, the most recent stripping naked of hundreds of old women in Amuru before Internal Affairs and Lands Minister in a protest against the regime's attempt to grab their land, is a classic example of a peaceful but determined defiance against the military dictatorship that can bring about immediate change. And the positive in this regard for the women of Amuru, who I personally see as my heroes, was wonderful. The results were immediate. The unarmed women forced the military generals to reverse their order of immediate forced evacuation, and they retreated. If we can appeal to these women, if we can appeal to the youth across the country directly, we can actually get this national robbers movement out of power before 2016 sets in. Therefore, should the opposition party leaders fail to provide the much craved for leadership to the masses of Uganda in order for them to reclaim their country from Museveni's military dictatorship, history will judge them harshly. I say this to those who are in the Democratic Alliance to reach out to everybody, not to exclude anyone who is working for democracy in Uganda. As I said, the bold and the brave attack on the police and the army installation by the locals in the Rwenzori region that left hundreds dead is one such example of how desperate the masses are in craving for change. Should the masses fail to reclaim their country because of lack of political leadership, we shall see total submission to Museveni's leadership and entrenchment of Musevenism for the next decades that will be a burden to our children, and the grandchildren will suffer from our laziness. Because separation is being misinterpreted as peace and stability by the world outside. Therefore, there is need for us to rise up and make a noise that the world outside would know that we are not suffering quietly, but we are suffering openly. Ugandans are desperate for change. That is why you see them going to people like Amama Mbabazi, whom by all measure has been the engine propelling the NRM regime. But JPM, or Johnny Patrick Amama Mbabazi, imposing demeanor has sometimes been a polarizing figure as far back as the Bush War days, and even some of his colleagues do not fancy him. Therefore, we need to do something quick. People like Major Pecos Kutesa in his book, Uganda's Revolution, 1979-1986, How I Saw It, writes with graphic detail how he was uncomfortable with the way Amama Mbabazi treated him. People like Samson Mande, when Amama Mbabazi was thrown out of government, he celebrated. These are people who know Amama Mbabazi better than many of us. So we need to be keen and careful as we rush to embrace him. However, I don't want to be misunderstood when I say this. When I say we should critically look at him, I'm not rejecting him. I am saying that we need to examine him critically in view of issues like the Temangalo concerns and other scandals. We need somebody who is clean. We need someone to come to us, and we go to them, and we form an alliance that is genuine, that is intended for our primary goal. The primary goal being the achievement of truth that will lead us to reconcile our country. We need people from all walks of life, even those who are in government. But those who are coming from government should not always come from government claiming to be at the head of the fight for freedom. They should come and be equal participants in the struggle for democracy. For us here at the Voice of Uganda Radio and this program, Uganda Panorama, ours is the duty of bringing you information. What you do with that information matters a lot. So, keep hope alive. Don't be hopeless, because that's not part of the agenda. There might be painful moments, but those are most likely pangs for the birth of democracy that is nigh. The day is near, our troubles will be over. Justice for all will prevail, and the war to elevate democracy, freedom, and liberty for all will be won, and it will be won on the good side. The evil ways of the Museveni regime and his NRM are not going to be the order of the day for long. Keep hope, keep fighting, keep moving, keep going forward. Freedom must prevail. Thank you for your time. May God bless.
It's not about the colors on the surface. It goes beyond the land that I have trodden. It goes before me everywhere I go. It's in the way I live and walk and talk. It's the spirit You're the spirit.